After 3.
Three.
On 3.
After 3.
1, 2, 3.
Happy
World
Product
Day!
Hey!
I like that one. There was more hands in that one.
Good morning, everyone. Hi, good morning, everyone.
Good morning, New Zealand. Hey.
Hey, everyone. My name is Ginger Lee. I am one of the organizers from Auckland community. And today we also have Anthony from Auckland, Tokes from Wellington, and Taz representing Christchurch here from the community of hosts to help make the event smoothly. As you see, here is our speaker, Eli from USA. Welcome, everyone. So we are here very excited to bring to you the very first event of the 4th World Product Day. As how lucky are we? We're always the first one to see the light in the world. So we have the honor to kick off today's amazing 24 hours of events. And it will be filled with thought-provoking speaks. And also there's a unique virtual networking event today as well. There's a virtual meeting room for us to mix and mingle from around the world. So this morning we bring to you Eli. He will be talking about beyond human-centered design. A little bit of intro for Eli here. Eli is a product and UX leader. He has worked with the big names like Amazon, Pivotal, AT&T, and many more companies to advance their design, data science, and product management practices. Eli also has been speaking at conferences. He's very much advocating for diversity, inclusivity, and cross-functional collaboration. So many of us here are probably, we all have been championing the user-centered design for many years now. But just like anything else, really, there's also the other side to be assessed for human-centered design. So today's topic could be a little bit controversial. So before I hand it over to Eli, I'd like to just point out one thing. And of course, you know, when Eli's talking, if you think of any questions, if you have anything that you wanted to ask, don't wait up, just head over to the YouTube chat function and go through using the chat and posting your question there at any point as soon as it comes to your mind. So we'll keep an eye on it. And when it comes to the Q&A period of this event, and we'll bring it up and talk about getting Eli to answer your questions. So there we have it. Without further ado, let me hand it over to Eli, and he will talk to us about beyond human-centered design.
Hey, before you go, I just wanted to, the video that played before was cool for a number of reasons, because I don't know how many product tanks there are, but Auckland and Wellington were in that flip reel of the 90 ones, and they only went through 10. So I feel like that's absolutely great representation from down under. So that was a great video. Hey, I think we're all going to leave, and we're going to leave Ginger and Eli to the screen, and the rest of us are going to sit back and enjoy everything. And hopefully we'll get some comments coming through on the YouTube comment section so that people can contribute to a Q&A at the end. And Taz, did you want to say something? I can see you there saying something. No? You're on mute. No one can hear you.
I wonder if it's the delay, but I'm on the YouTube channel and it still says 24-hour networking room, and it says started streaming 3 minutes ago, but I don't see.
That's it. It's all good for me. I can see our content coming through, so I think we're all good.
Oh, sweet. Okay.
Well, that's good. All right. I think we're all good to go. Right. I'm going to get us out of here, and we are going to start things. And you couldn't hear me then, so I'm going as well. So I will leave, and then you won't hear from me again, and we're going to get you to do your thing. So take it away.
Cool. Can everyone see my screen?
All right, I'm going to assume that's a yes. All right, so today we are talking about moving beyond human-centered design. And specifically, the subtitle of this talk is Unfucking the World by Using a Bigger Lens. The reason this topic is so important to me is because I think looking at, say, the last decade of product, I think we've made a lot of choices that have been, informed by some of the economics of our day and time, but we could do better and we could be better. And this is a little bit about that. So why the hell should you listen to me? Well, I'm the head of user experience at Kazoo. I am a product and design leadership coach. I've built teams at companies of all sizes, and I probably have a few experiences that might be worth learning from. That doesn't mean I'm going to get everything right. I welcome your questions and comments. Feedback is always welcome. And if you're interested in some of my other work, I write a blog at blossomat.work, and there will be a guide to this talk there when we're done. So let's go ahead and get started. We've been told that human-centered design is so important and so fundamental and so relevant to the way that we should build products that probably most of you recognize what this is, right? We've been taught to think of design as something that impacts Mary, but it impacts Stephen and Jamila, Jose, Lynn, Fernanda, and the ecosystem around them, the world around them, the way that society functions, and what I think is really important to keep in mind is that this is not bad design, it's just limited in its thinking. And so I'm going to take you on a journey, and maybe we can talk a little bit about what that means. But this is Mary, and if you've seen one of these before, it's called a proto-persona. It's a set of assumptions that helps us empathize with our customers, and it helps us really think about who that customer might be. And one of the main arguments I'll be making today is that just focusing on this one person really limits the way that we understand what else is out there. So we've been told that human-centered products should be usable, useful, desirable, delightful, and meaningful. And I think that these things are really, really important. And by crafting user-friendly interfaces, we, often relieve them of the need to think, relieve them of some of the stresses of life, and that can be good. But there's a dark side to this, right? And that dark side is that, usable products can make us a little bit thoughtless. Useful products could make us wasteful. Desirable products can make us addicted, right? They can be addictive. Delightful products could be frivolous, and meaningful products in their anti-patterns can make us a little bit self-centered. And I think service design as it's been done to date and interaction design as it's been done to date has had a very specific lens on optimizing for individual use cases rather than collective impact or environmental empathy. And I think that that's really important to think about. So let's take a closer look at human-centered design. So shortly after ProductTank was founded, Mark Andreessen wrote his now foundational article about how software is eating the world. And most product managers have probably heard this, but we're in a very different time now. We're in a place where software is the world. 7 of the 10 largest companies in the world are tech companies. And when we think about what that means for us, it means that really we are the ones shaping the world, the way it works, the way money moves in it, the way people make decisions. I mean, we're shaping the way people spend their time, people's privacy, people's environmental air quality with things like, a heavy logistics footprint, that sort of thing. It's really, really, really important to think about these things because human-centered design has put us in a place where we look at just the individual transaction between a single person and a company, but it's probably not enough to do that. So what does it mean to look at, beyond human-centered design? Victor Papanek is an author who wrote a book called Design for the Real World. And I think that this quote is really fundamental and important, because what Victor says is there are professions more harmful than industrial design, but only a few. And one of the things that's so significant about that is that design, when applied well, can be a great tool in making sure that we do things with intent. And I think one of the challenges of human-centered design is it's not enough. It's put us in a place where we only think about an individual and their interaction with a company. And by only looking at that layer of things, we're really missing out on product strategy and opportunities, and certainly the environmental impact and the ethical impacts of the products that we're designing. So I want to suggest a couple of things that we can do to move design forward, and embracing some of the things that human-centered design has taught us. How do we use a bigger lens to get there? So the first thing that we should do is uncover systems and impacts. And what I mean by that is we should no longer measure success at the individual level when it comes to our product. So for example, take Uber. Uber optimizes for your rides and the speed of delivery if you're getting a food delivery, which is all too common these days, being locked down in a pandemic. But one of the challenges of the Uber business model is that they keep a lot of cars on the road. And, while you as an individual might be getting a delivery that, is convenient and friendly and useful and even usable, and your individual experience is really great, that's happening in a system where the overall outcome might not be as great. Human-centered design happens in systems. There's a car, there's a driver, there's the food, there's how it gets around. All those things happen in an interconnected network. And I think that one of the challenges of human-centered design is it has set us up to only look at the individual customer who's paying us money without really thinking about the system level consequences, right? And if we don't consider those system level consequences, we might not see another century of product development. And what a shame that would be. So I want to talk a little bit about how we start to move away from that and start to look at building regenerative products. One of the things that we should do is think about the ways in which individualism, and specifically the ways in which tailoring for an individual and personalization, can really limit something's usefulness. And in digital products, personalization is all the rage, and Jeff Bezos and Amazon have made a lot of money doing personalization. But the more something's tailored for an individual's needs and their likes and dislikes, the more it's going to limit the reapplication of that product to other needs, other markets, other ways of working, other contexts. And we should really think about the trade-offs that we're making when we start to consider that. And this might all sound theoretical. So what I'll do is, in just a second, we're going to talk a little bit about how we change where we measure value. So let's take a look at that. Here's the thing. Uber and Lyft increase ride-hailing services like Uber and Lyft increase carbon emissions, and they create 70% more pollution than the taxis that they replace, right? There's an availability bias, and because we've designed those services for convenience, they end up costing us a lot more, because to maintain a service level, they have to keep more cars on the road, more drivers on the road, more fuel hours consumed overall. And so it's not necessarily actually a really smart product for the long run, because that means increased cost to the driver. It means increased costs of vehicle maintenance. And we're just burning through resources that don't necessarily need to be burned through. And, it's not just a moral crisis. Maybe you're like, okay, well, yeah, environment, so what? But it's not just a moral crisis. It's bad business. Here's the thing. Uber and Lyft have essentially been cornering markets by heavily subsidizing the actual cost of operations. Lyft has lost $1 billion. Uber, with its bigger scope, has lost about $3 billion. And the gravy train is ending, right? We've basically been using venture capital to subsidize rides at a really, really high cost to corner a market in the hopes that it would be profitable. But it doesn't seem like we're actually going to get there because there's not enough value in this market to sustain it for the long term. And it's not just Uber and Lyft. I mean, there's the entire delivery economy, which feels particularly relevant to us right now because of everyone being in a pandemic, right? And so, you know, I'm preaching to myself here. I've gotten food delivery during this because it is one of those things that's convenient and easy to do. But I think we have to start to make considered decisions about the impact of those things to start to understand what our future could or should be. I came across an article preparing for this talk on Substack, and it was talking about pizza arbitrage. And the author of this post noticed that DoorDash and food delivery services are a huge money loser. And one of the things that's really, really significant about that is the ways in which we are using subsidies and, you know, essentially platforming and platform monopolization to drive a business model that's extracting value from restaurateurs, that's extracting value from delivery drivers in the name of convenience, but hemorrhaging a ton of money along the way. And when you look at like the long-term viability of that market as a product manager, what are you actually getting for that, right? And so you start to have to ask questions like, what is the long-term play here? Because a monopoly doesn't seem to actually be doing very much to generate profit. And, you know, I'll show you a little bit about what I mean. So, you know, in all of 2019, DoorDash lost 450 million. Grubhub lost 33 million, and Uber Eats lost 1.2 billion to make $734 million. The easy come, easy go approach to venture capital has led us to building products that are actually just kind of bad products. These products aren't really that useful. And they're useful on an individual level, right? Like there's, you know, that night when you're not particularly interested in cooking, you're not particularly interested in anything that you've got in the fridge, or the fridge is empty, and, you know, you want a delivery, and that's fine. That's absolutely not the problem in and of itself. It's the ways in which we measure value as product people, right? The way we move money around and actually measure value needs to change, because right now we're losing lots of money and everyone is losing, right? The drivers and riders and people who deliver this food are costing companies more money. There's higher operating costs. There's a lot more haphazard, you know, approaches. People don't have job security. They don't have health insurance. They don't have health care. You know, there's a lot of value that's just being lost in this system. And, you know, the system is focused on extracting as much capital from restaurants as possible, not necessarily in extracting as much value from, you know, the overall system and for the good of all. And so I think when we start to look at business models like this, what we have to do is recognize that, like, there are probably some hard choices to be made if we're going to develop products for the future that really set people up for success. And we have to change where we measure value if we're going to do that. So how would we build regenerative products? Well, I think one of the things that we need to remind ourselves is that the world that we've designed, remember, 7 of 10 of the largest companies in the world are tech companies. 7 of those 10 companies are influenced by the people that are listening to this talk right now, right? And the world that we've designed is now designing us. We are facing behaviors and systems that we unleashed on the world. And it's probably time to ask ourselves some hard questions and think about what we should be doing next. Because I think one of the dangers is we walk into the next decade or next century of product management and of product development, and think that we can do it without being intentional about the design of these things. One of the things that stuck out to me putting together this talk was that the absence of design is a kind of hazardous design. And it's really important not to be blind and not to blind ourselves or choose to be ignorant about the ways in which products have an impact on the world, right? Steve Jobs used to say, I want to put a dent in the universe. And somebody's going to have to buff that out if we're not conscious and if we don't make time to really care for our products, our customers, the world they live in, and how those products are shaped to meet their needs. If we want to see the next century of product development, the world demands better from us. So let's talk a little bit about how to do that. One of the things that's super important is remembering that everything has a larger context. So your product happens in a system, and when you're looking at individual choices, right? Should we use an input or a drop down or anything else? That's the interaction. And it happens in a digital product for most of you here. So that's an interface. Even if it's a physical product, that's an interface. That interface has a location, be it the customer's phone or their computer or their tablet or the ATM that they use on the street. There is a journey that a customer takes to get there. There is, the structure of your product overall. There's that product in its system. If you're a bank, you're part of a banking system. If you sell flowers online, you're part of, both logistics and flowers and retail systems. And then there's the ecosystem, which is the broader world. And if this sounds a little hippy dippy, like, why should I care? This is all great, but like, what the fuck are you getting at? Cool. Look, this is the kind of thing that I think is really important, but I'm not the only one. I'm going to quote Teresa Torres here, who just unleashed a really fantastic framework for thinking about it. And she calls it the Jedi framework. So there's justice, equity, diversity, and inclusion. And those 4 pillars can help you really make informed choices about the future and about the structure of your products moving forward. And there's a couple other tools that we don't have time to get into in depth. But one of the things I'll do is I'll give you a brief overview of them. And then I do have a resource guide that I'll link to that has a couple more in-depth how-to guides for some of these tools that you'll see, because I don't want to spend a whole lot of time digging into that, because I want to make room for everyone's time or everyone's questions if we have some really good questions, which it sounds like we do. So here are a couple tools at a glance. There is the service blueprint and the journey map. These are both system mapping tools. A service blueprint can really help you understand how your back-end systems connect to your customer's journey. And if you've never seen one of these before, ask a designer about it, Google it, service blueprints. They're really cool. They're a little complicated to do, but they're really, really valuable for creating a source of truth of how a product works. And you could probably get about 40 to 60% of the way there if you're doing a business model canvas, but this really helps you visualize it and connect the tech that powers your product back to the customer journey and identify like ways in which some of the things that customers might be complaining about may not actually fit with your business model, or some of the things that your customers are complaining about aren't really anyone's responsibility. I remember one time I was working on a product with a team that was working on a healthcare app. And we found that the biggest source of customer complaints was something that literally nobody in the company was responsible for, and they didn't even have on the roadmap. And so we were able to add a lot of value by using a service blueprint to identify that, raise some questions, and talk about the ways in which somebody should probably take responsibility for that one particular thing that customers were complaining about that just kind of seemed to fall between the cracks. Another tool that you can use to map value is a customer journey map. And probably most of you are more familiar with this because it tends to be the level that most product managers and product designers think at, which is fine. But make sure that you use both these tools hand in hand, because we want to understand the customer journey, but we also need to understand the system that it happens in, both our own system and the wider system that it's in the context of. So we'll take a look at some cool broader systems tools next. So there's this thing called a rich picture method. And what it does is it helps break out, kind of like a service blueprint, but a little bit scrappier. You can break out so the process that's captured here is actually a doctor's call, right? So a patient or a doctor's appointment. So a patient makes a call to the front desk rep, who then uses the front desk app to pull data about the schedule and make schedule updates for the doctor and the nurse who are going to serve that patient. And doing this can kind of show you all the ways in which, it's kind of like a proto service blueprint. I think that this works really well for starting to understand who's doing what in a system and how should we understand their role, their impact, and what they're trying to do. And then there's a service ecology. A service ecology is a little bit more complex, but what you can start to do with a service ecology is think about the ways in which your product happens in its overall service context, right? So it really helps you identify opportunities to optimize and to think about the layers at which your customer is interacting with your product. What is their mindset, and how does your service get delivered, and what kinds of things would help that service? Why is this important? One of the things I think is really important is, here's a little context for you. 1 day's energy waste from tea kettles in the UK is enough to light all the street lights in England for a night. And if you think that that's not a product development problem, I'm going to tell you you're wrong. You know why? Because you can make a single cup tea kettle where it's really easy to boil a single cup of tea. And just by doing that, we would eliminate enough waste to power all the streetlights in England for a single night. And that's the kind of thing that we could do better at just by making more conscientious choices. So as a product manager, what kinds of accidental waste could you prevent by being a little bit more conscientious? What kind of shipping options are you giving customers so that they can choose to have it delivered slowly? Those sorts of things. Look, the thing to remember is that the world isn't broken, at least not accidentally. It's designed and it's working the way it was designed to work. And if it's going to be a better world, we're going to have to work together to design it because we're the ones who designed it this way. Remember that we looked at this chart before, and usable products and useful products and desirable products and delightful products and meaningful products, they all have their place. But I would encourage us to think about a model in which we're a little bit more forward thinking in the future. Let's look at ways to start from a baseline of responsible and build on that to be equitable and empowering and sustainable and ultimately regenerative. If you're hoping for some reading on this, like I said, I do have a resource guide that will be published on this, so you can take a look at that. But here are some books. I'll call them out really quickly, and then we'll jump to questions. Thinking in Systems by Daniela Meadows, How to Make Sense of Any Mess, Mapping Experiences, This is Service Design Doing. Take a screenshot if you want. These are all really, really great books designed for the real world. And then if you want, you can say hi to me on Twitter. Let me know if you loved or hated this talk. I would love to hear from you either way. And I do have, like I said, a product leadership blog, and I'll be posting a little bit more about this talk and specifically some add-ons and takeaways to it at blossomat.work. Cool. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you so much for the fantastic talk, Eli. That's absolutely amazing. Certainly, just judging by the comments and people been discussing while you were talking, definitely is a thought-provoking and getting us to really think about what we're designing, what the product we're building, our responsibilities in the end of the day. So thank you once again. So here I can see the other committee members are showing up on screen now. And now we're coming into the Q&A.
like in the private chat, we were saying, oh, we should all come back and have a chat with Eli because this is super interesting, and sort of mix it up with our own thoughts as well as getting some of that feedback that was coming back from the YouTube comments. Ginger, why don't you have a look at the YouTube comments, see if you see anything interesting you want to pull, and then that'll give me time to ask my question, so I can get it first, because that's what it's all about, right? So I had a question. So it feels like there's this fundamental tension between the availability of humans to prioritize their own personal needs ahead of everything else, right? And then only later think about the consequence of that. Like, there's so many examples of that in human history, right? Like, it's genetically built into us to be selfish, right? And so is it not true that companies are simply leveraging that fallibility and creating stuff that makes me happy and only think about the consequences on the planet later on? And so how do we reverse that? That seems like not just a problem for business, but a problem for us as consumers to change what we value away from ourselves and thinking more big.
Yeah, I think it's complicated and there's no easy answers, right? But we do tend to prioritize ourselves at the expense of, big picture outcomes. People are built for instant gratification, and that's that lizard brain. I think one of the things that's really important there is getting comfortable with being uncomfortable, and remembering that convenience isn't the only thing that we should value in life, and that really building an economy of convenience is something that we've really done over the last 100 years of human history, and things don't have to be this way just because they've been this way so far, right? There are other ways to live. There are, more beneficial ways to live, more balanced ways to live. And we can, as product people, start to measure those and ask about those and talk about, like, okay, what are the long-term consequences? One of the things that I think we as product people should be talking about is there an upper limit to my product, right? If you sell, for example, bets or gambling, how much is too much? What are you enabling at the cost of someone's quality of life? Oh, here's a fun one.
Yeah, I just brought this in. Colin seems to be sort of, again, talking about how we as humans celebrate these companies that are perhaps not being so responsible ultimately. What do you think about that?
I think the soft bankification of venture capital is a detriment to the industry. And I think specifically that, like, having a ton of cash to throw at a problem to build monopolies is not the best way to build a company. These opinions are mine. You can feel free to disagree, but I think a heavy focus on conquering a market and cornering it at the expense of everything else, like, we should change who we think we look up to in terms of product, right? Like, I think of WeWork, and they're really in it now, and like tons of money has been spent selling a vision that, like, we can't actually deliver on because there's just not enough office space in the world to, and a profit margin that is sustainable enough to really get the upper value of both their valuation as well as, like, the long-term benefits of that valuation, right? And I think we need to ask the entire industry to be a little bit more conscientious about what it is that we value and how. And, I want to work with the VCs who are thinking big picture about, like, how do we build sustainable businesses, not just because we have an influx of capital today, but sustainable for the long-term future, right? How do we ask the hard questions of ourselves about where we're measuring value to get to a better place and a better world? And how do we invest in companies that are putting in the work to do that?
And actually, Tracy, do you mind if I jump in with a question there, just to pick up on Eli's point about, VCs that are kind of seeing the big picture? Do you see more like inter-organizational cooperation coming out of this? So rather than organizations just working within themselves, actually starting to work between organizations once they recognize that they're part of a broader system?
I mean, that would be wonderful. I don't know if that's the kind of thing that we could incentivize with today's business models, but it would be great. I think one place where this has actually happened and is really interesting is telecommunications. So telecommunications have standards. So I used to work at AT&T, and like to design 3G, 4G, 5G, there's a standard that people adhere to, and they say, okay, this is the standard that we want to operate at. And like standards design is actually pretty old school, but it's something that could be really meaningful for thinking about metaphors to help us design a better future, right? Because cross-industry collaboration, or if you're, say, package and parcel delivery driver was also delivering medicine, right? And so more interoperability and modularity might be one of those things that could save logistics, the logistics footprint, and optimize things. Whether companies are willing to do that, I think, is anyone's bet. But if people can make something a little bit more ubiquitous, I suspect that that'll be better for everyone.
Is it actually additive, right? Because you can't create a, let's use the government example. The government can't force everyone to drive electric vehicles and ride bicycles, right? Like, even though that would be better for the planet, for the individual, that would be cost prohibitive, that would be maybe just not what they want to do, right? Like, so how much can we force, how much, it feels like there's a two-way tussle here, right? You can't force companies to do ethical products if nobody wants to buy them.
Well, I think that that's interesting because, I mean, literally they can force people to drive electric cars. That's happening in the UK. Like, they're phasing out petrol vehicles in 2030. And so I think, and Volkswagen is shifting their entire fleet of vehicles to electric by 2030. So it's not unprecedented. And there are places where it's more egregious. Like if you live in a rural area with not a whole lot of charging stations, you're probably not ripe for an electric vehicle. And electric vehicles are only part of the solution. I think that they're a big part, but they're only part of the solution. We do need to think a little bit more about how we measure the economics of these things, I think, for the long term.
I will just say here, Tokes, that governments have been manipulating us in the direction they want for a long time. Sorry, I'm going to sound like a conspiracy theorist, but that's not true. So think about think about the percentage of people who smoked 30 years ago versus today, and how smoking is regarded in today's society. Is the same thing is changing for even getting on your bike versus getting on a car for short distance. There's a lot of other things, small, and I might even negatively use the example of property investment. One way or the other, they have incentivized it so that more and more people are going into that kind of sector rather than actually productive investment.
I mean, maybe that example, because they have different levers, right? But are there good examples of commercial companies that you look at that you think are managing to get that balance of individual benefit and greater good, right?
Yeah, I think Patagonia is actually a really great example of a product development company, a modern product development company who's thinking about their ecological footprint and customer value. And they consider those things two parts of a whole equation, right? So Patagonia is working towards a lifetime repairability guarantee where they will help you repair things rather than trade them in. They will help you fix things rather than, throw them away. And I think that that's the sort of thing that can really help us move the needle. And, I think David just wrote that tax incentives are a double-edged sword. And absolutely, I don't think taxes are the only way to deal with this, or tax incentives, right? And I'm certainly not an economist or a public policy expert. I just think that the intersection of economics and product design is super, super important. And I think that what we want to do is start identifying places where customer value and sustainability intersect, because that's probably where we're going to get the best value, not just for the short term, but for the long term, right? Patagonia has built a business model now where they can basically guarantee long-term customer loyalty through the way that they've tweaked their business model and their product development offering. And they probably get more modularity out of the products that they're developing because they design them to a certain standard. And if you buy it today or 10 years from now, guess what? We can use the same standard. And that should mean that we can repair older things with newer parts that might be better, cheaper, lighter, stronger, but in a way that's like still modular. And so these all have benefits, and these are all tools that are in our toolkit as product people to really move the needle forward. Just have to, be willing to try and ask those hard questions.
And just like what Eli was saying about the system design, right? No product is sitting outside of a system. We're always sitting in many different systems that intersect with each other, like the electric car conversation we're just having, and looking at the batteries, mining for the batteries, and the disposal of the batteries as a big problem if we're not designing that system to be coming together.
Yep, absolutely. Rare earth minerals are, again, another place that we need to start asking hard questions about. How do we do this? How do we really think about the ways in which we move to a cleaner economy, but also do it in a way that doesn't just shift the problem somewhere else? Okay, great. That's another example of zero. Absolutely. I think it's really important to start to talk about these people and to praise those efforts, right? Because Patagonia is one. And, for every, oh, here we go. Ian.
Sorry, I was trying to post these questions without interfering with your current train of thought. So it's quite hard.
It's all good. It's all good. So beyond product and design worlds we live in, what else do you think we could look to inspiration for new frameworks or regenerative products from? Effective altruism comes to mind. I think that there's actually quite a bit of work in ecology, strangely enough. There's a project called Open Source Ecology. And then there are a number of other places where people have done like permaculture. And I think that those kinds of models start to help inform us of the ways in which we could, just take a broader lens. And a friend of mine, his name's Randy Silver, he looks in other industries for product development tips. And, there are always lessons to be learned. One of Randy's favorite examples is the 11 Laws of Show Running by a guy who's a producer and has done lots of stuff. And while that's not necessarily an ecological framework, like there are lots of product lessons that we could pick up from almost anywhere in the world, right? I think Formula One teams are actually a really big inspiration for the level of coordination that they have, in the way that they work together and can do a pit change in 2.5 seconds. Tidy Street Project. I have not actually seen that one, so I will definitely take it away and read about it.
I hadn't heard about it, but I guess I think they're trying to get at the idea of, can you fool people into doing the right thing by gamifying an experience that's good for maybe for a tidy street?
Oh, yeah. Okay, I remember this. This one was the one about gum and cigarette butts, right? Where you would toss a cigarette butt in a bin to vote on something. Absolutely. I think like those are the sorts of things that like we could design our products for. I think we've been designing our products exclusively to focus on capturing value just for us. And we could take a slightly broader lens and make sure that we're looking at the whole system, and think about the ways in which we start to like develop a conversation and develop feedback loops that help us improve society and not just our bottom line. I think it's important to remember that businesses can be sustainable and they can add value and be regenerative to the economy as well and to the planet. Like there has to be a way to design that. And I am, starting to move towards that in my personal thinking about how we build products.
Do you think that there may be a fast and a slow sort of cadence thing going on here? Because I think some of these questions have talked to sort of the difference between, as in we talk about moving faster, the world is exponentially moving faster. And I read something interesting from, I think it was Stripe the other day, saying that they challenged their team by saying, well, hang on, what about thinking on a 10-year horizon or a 30-year horizon, just to force people to think out beyond that very fast cadence? So do you think there's a balance there maybe that we need to bring that slow cadence back in again?
That's a good question. I think that's probably right. I think that there's, always multiple ways of doing things, and we should probably think on multiple time horizons, right? So today, next week, next month, next year, next decade, next century, those are the sorts of like time horizons that we could start to think about. And, as product people, even just introducing the question of like, hey, what would it look like if we wanted our product to exist a century from now, can introduce all sorts of interesting thinking.
I think this is a good comment that's just popped in there from Thomas. Is this indicative of the size of the problem that, as we start to extend out globally, the size of that problem becomes a longer time horizon. I guess things like, climate change are a great example of that, we can do things on a fast cadence and we don't see anything, we don't see a negative effect, but the negative effect is a 50, 100-year effect.
Yeah. I know human psychology is geared towards the short term, and being aware of that, I think it's not just on businesses and it's not just on product managers to do something, but if we all do something rather than nothing, that's exponentially more value than we would have otherwise.
Yeah, definitely. Humans, we are all inherently bad at thinking longer term and bigger picture, but I guess being product leaders ourselves and even just bringing up the question from time to time and make people stop and think, I think that do contribute to the longer term change.
Yeah, absolutely.
We've had some people who've had to drop off the call while people gather their thoughts. I wanted to press on. So David really clearly uppercase liked your talk. So there's some really good feedback that came through from people who may have had to jump off the call and finish their breakfast or get their kids to school.
Well, I really appreciate all my friends in New Zealand. I think you're all great. Thank you for tuning in and kicking off World Product Day. I hope that it is a day full of learning and joy for all of you. And I can't think of a better crowd to start my World Product Day with. Yeah,
thanks for being at the first one. It's like we always try and race each other between Australia and New Zealand. Time zones on our side, so our breakfast slot means that there's no way they can beat us this year. I remember early on we did our normal evening slot, and they managed to do one at lunchtime and beat us to it. That only happened once. We're wise. We're wise to do that.
And there's also something of a degree of irony as well that we're doing this one remotely, whereas we could actually, we're one of the few countries in the world where we're fortunate enough to be able to gather in person. So, there's a bit of a degree of irony there to that, that we would love to everyone together. But there's a lot going on in New Zealand today with the Leading the Product conference kicking off at 11 o'clock. So, a lot of busy people today, a lot of amazing product content coming up.
Well, I hope you all have a fantastic World Product Day. And thank you so much. Sending love to all of you. Stay safe. Keep up the good work and just ask hard questions, because I think the only thing that we can do is start asking hard questions, right? I think there are no easy answers, but there are easy questions. And if we ask those questions, we might get better value than not asking them at all. If y'all check out Blossom at Work, blossom@.work, I will be posting the slides as well as some additional resources for this talk there. And if you happen to be really, really interested in this talk, there will be a second showing of it at ProductTank Hamburg in less than 24 hours. So if you want a double dose, show up to ProductTank Hamburg in a couple of hours.
And I see we have somebody from Hamburg on the line already, just lining up and getting in early. So good on Jan.
Okay, so on that note, so throughout today, you're probably already aware, we also have this 24 hours networking chat room that's open for 24 hours a day. And so some of us over here, Tokes, Amy and myself will all be hosting sessions here. So if you, any point of today's a very busy day, you want to take a break and come and talk to us, to talk to some other like-minded product people, some friends around the world and come and join us. You can find the details how to get into the virtual chat room on the Product World Day website. It's on the page there. And also there are a couple of very interesting talks coming up from our neighbors in Australia. So first one is at 2 p.m. New Zealand time from the Brisbane community. They are hosting John Cutler for a fantastic talk there. And then at 2:30 from Melbourne community featuring Teresa Torres. So yeah, feel free to come back in and listen to more and learn more today. And just one last thought before we go, a little announcement. So we're going to have, which is from Auckland ProductTank community, we do have a very exciting event coming up very shortly on the 10th of June as well. That is with Teresa Torres. So do keep an eye on our meetup page. More will come.
And that will be a New Zealand-wide event, so that will be open to everyone. We will be live streaming it as we always do.
Yeah. To David's question real quick, open source ecology, if you look that up, you'll find a bunch of stuff. And then my work will be shared at blossom@.work. That's blossom, BLOSSOM, at the word @.work, WORK. It was in my slides. Could we pull that up real quick, folks? There you go. And I will also tweet about this as soon as it's up. So if you want to follow me on Twitter, that's a great way to keep in touch. Cool. Thank you, everyone. I hope you all have a wonderful World Product Day. Thank you to the ProductTank organizers. And thank you to Mind the Product for such a great event. I am looking forward to learning from some other talks today. It's going to be great.
Well, massive thanks from all of us, Eli. Really, really, really appreciate it. Very thought-provoking talk, and yeah, I hope everyone in Auckland, everyone in New Zealand has a fantastic day. I hope that you will take at least one thing from today and apply it to your schedule today. If you're having a strategy conversation with one of your execs, hey, drop in that 10-year horizon, start asking these questions.
Cool. Thanks, everyone.
See you, everyone.
Cool. Have a great day. Bye.
Thanks, friends.